Welcome to Forest.chat, where we talk about individual endeavour in West Australia, what it takes and what it means and how to do it. I'm your host, Caroline Vandermeer, and in today's episode we'll be talking to Paul Vandermeer about volunteering at parkrun as a photographer. Paul started taking photos at parkrun in November 2012. He has now volunteered 335 times, not just as photographer, but of those, 291 have been photographer, and he has also completed 192 parkruns. You will often find Paul's photos published in the weekly parkrun newsletter, as Paul is a photo and video ambassador for parkrun, where he puts forward photos to Parkrun Australia for use in their newsletter, as well as websites, social media and advertising campaigns. Welcome to Forest.chat, Paul.
Thank you, Caroline. There's a lot of big numbers in there.
There certainly is. You've been doing this for a little while then.
I have. I've enjoyed every minute too.
That's great. That's great. And I think people love your photos as well. So I think it's been a two-way street there.
Fantastic. I really enjoy that people like the photos that I've taken.
That's great. So can you tell me a little bit more about taking photos for parkrun?
The photographer role at parkrun is aimed at promoting parkrun to other people. Every parkrun has the photographer role as a volunteer role, and the photos go up onto social media and are used to promote the event. How that works is that generally people share those albums with their friends, and then they end up seeing that their friends are doing something, and then they come along. An example of that would be Rodney Glossop, who was on a couple of episodes ago. He saw a friend and their family doing parkrun and then decided that that could also be a good thing for them. So that happens a lot, and that's one of the key reasons that parkrun are so keen to have a photographer on board at each event.
So, Paul, what does it take to be a photographer for parkrun?
For me to be a parkrun photographer, I work out where I'm going to go, and then I have a standard set of equipment that I take with me. So beforehand I get my gear ready, make sure batteries are charged, and I remember my memory cards, that they're in the cameras. And I have a think about the course, especially if I've been there before, and think about what I might be able to do that's a little bit different. So there's a little bit of creativity comes into that. I base that also on having done some before. I've got experience looking at different backgrounds and that sort of thing. So I have a pretty good understanding of what I want to get in the background of my photos. And when you're wandering around, you actually just see the background, and you have to imagine what the runners would do at that point on the course. So sometimes you can find runners who are doing a sharp turn or something like that, and they get a body lean on. They're always a good spot to be, depending on what the light is like. So I have a think about the course, and then on the day I'll go and actually have a look at that course. We get there a little bit early so that I can do that. Then as the other park runners arrive, because I did get there early, then it's about engaging with them, and usually I ask if they want a pre-run photo, and most people do. Occasionally you get some people who don't, but the vast majority of people do. They tend to prefer having a photo of them looking, fresh and excited about being there before the run. You need to have a bit of a creative thought about where you're going to take photos. Every parkrun does have somewhere that you can take really good photos at, seriously good photos at. And that's not always the common place or the easy place to get to. For example, Collie Parkrun, they've got a lovely lineup of trees alongside the path where you start. And on the on the other side of the path, when you look back towards the start as a photographer, there's a fence. And that's a very easy place to go. And it's a nice enough place. I've got some nice photos from that area there. And it is possible, if you stand closer to the fence, to more look away. And then in the background, you fall into the trap of getting maybe some cars in the background, or, there are shops across the road. They're a bit of a distance away, but, they do tend to show up, and they're very light and you can see them easily and that sort of thing in the photo, especially because the runners will be probably more shaded, so they're darker. So, the white shops in the background will stand out. But I don't know, 5 or 6 weeks ago we went to Collie Parkrun, and over on the other side of the river they have a beautiful arboretum area, and the bank flows down into the river, and at one point the path runs towards the river rather than along the river. So I stationed myself partway down the bank so that the camera was basically at about foot height, looking up at the runners, and that was a really interesting spot. And all you could see around was, depending on where the runner was, but it was basically, you could see the path, you could see a little bit of the bank or the top of the bank, and you could see trees on either side and trees in the background and the sky. And because it's near the horse training area there was depending on where the runner was on the path, left or right, you might actually get a little bit of there's like when you go into the OK Curtailed, you've got the uprights on the side and a bar across the top with like a name on it. It's not very obvious, but it was there if you knew what you were looking for. So you need to, look at a park run and see different things. Mostly you're looking at the background, what's in the background. And I spent a lot of time trying to avoid getting toilets and bins in the background, and joking about how we're taking photos in front of the toilet with people, so it gets them to turn around pretty easy. And then, think about where the runner will be within that. And, that brings you down to the point of equipment, because depending on what your camera is will then determine, where you need to stand to get the photo that you want. And I've been lucky that I've got a choice of equipment, but you can get fantastic photos with a phone as well. And in fact, you can turn your photos around probably a lot more quickly with the phone, like get them posted up afterwards. I tend to like my options of different focal lengths and that sort of thing, which I get with the equipment that I use.
It sounds like you put a lot of thought into just positioning where you're going to take the photos.
Yeah, we'll often go for I'll call it a warm-up before parkrun, and they can be a bit slow sometimes, and I'm going like, I need to have a look at it from this angle or that angle. Where on earth are we going to find a good angle for me to be? And even a little parkrun I say little, it's only little because you do multiple laps, and that's the Australind parkrun. So that's basically a 1K out and back, which is around the park with the grass. And then it does 2 laps. So it's about half and half. So you effectively do 3 laps of the grass there. So you can, get around and choose different locations depending on where you are in the flow of runners. You can get most people multiple times. You can get everybody multiple times if you hang around. Even within that, 500 metres length of path, you've got 2 path options, one near the water and one near the road. In that distance, you could stand almost anywhere along those areas and get great photos, except probably if you go where the toilets are.
We've got a toilet theme happening, right? Avoid the toilets and avoid bins. Number 1 lesson, right?
Yes. At Australind, the bins are bright orange and they show up in the back of all the photos. Make sure you get a runner in front of the bin.
So we've talked about what it takes. After the break, it would be good to look at the difference being a photographer for parkrun makes. So taking photos can be such a wonderful thing. And so tell me what being a photographer for parkrun means to you, your family, or the community.
Caroline had been talking to a couple of people that we know about parkrun, and one of them had been the volunteer photographer before we started, so like a week or 2 before, I think. Anyway, so we had a look at a couple of the photos from there, and we had a talk, and the idea was that Caroline would run and I could take photos as a volunteer, because I'd been setting up photos and doing all sorts of experimenty type things, checking out how focal lengths work and apertures work and all that sort of thing. So I'd been exploring photography as a technical thing to do, and I thought, it's probably really, well, it is, it's really hard to find people who want their photos taken. And I figure it'd be much more fun taking photos of people than it would be taking photos of, the tape measure that I've got, and, the flowers that we've got, or, even the birds in the bird bath outside, that sort of stuff. So decided to go along. Every time Caroline went along to run, we went 1 week, about event 17 at Claysbrook in November, and then we had a trip to Singapore, so we were away for a couple of weekends, and then we came back and effectively did every weekend we were anywhere near a parkrun since then. And in that Caroline did her first 50, but I probably did my first 50 photographer, except if I was not there for a rally or something like that. So for me, it was really, really helpful for me to get to know people who were the runners, because my job was to go and see all the runners and take photos of them. So I would be taking photos beforehand, taking photos as they run through. And at that time, people were being tagged on Facebook, so you could actually identify who it was that you'd taken a photo of. So you then had a name, and then I could actually call out encouragement and call people by name, which was that really fast-tracked getting to know a lot of people in the parkrun community at that point in time. Now that tied up with going for a coffee afterwards, and that gave a really good community feeling. So I really appreciated that.
Excellent. And I think, parkrun's such a good community thing, but I think being a photographer, you have that extra special role of, being able to encourage people as well as take great photos. And, you've become quite known for your photos as well through that process. Oh, Paul's taking photos at parkrun today.
Yes, and, some events do ask me to come along and take photos.
Yep.
And I do that where it fits in. My parkrun manager needs to ensure that all of that sort of stuff lines up neatly. Thank you, Caroline.
That's good fun to do. So being a photographer presents a great opportunity for getting to know people and presenting the best side of them as, an athlete or a walker, or even just the family things. I remember initially at parkrun, and one of the first ones, seeing families running and walking together and seeing that community spirit and family spirit that have been captured in some of your photos. And I think that's a really amazing thing to do.
Yeah, I definitely aim to show people at their best. These days I'm taking lots and lots of photos. Like I've got it on burst mode and away we go, So I've usually got multiple photos of each person. But a couple of things, people viewing the photos tend to get a little bit overloaded if you put out too many photos. A part of the parkrun photographer role is to document the event. That is pretty much aiming to get photos of each person who attended, whether they're on their own or in a group, so that there's some visual record of the individual having been there. Doing that at an event with 100 people and you're seeing them 3 times, plus before and after, that can add up to a lot of photos when you take multiple photos each time you see them. You just think about that, and not a surprise for me to come home with a couple of thousand photos. It is a bit of a surprise when it's 4,000 photos.
Is that your most?
Yeah, I think 4,000-ish is about the most that I've taken so far. But we've also concentrated, I guess, more on smaller events rather than larger events. So it's not a potential all-time record. I think it's just where it is at the moment. And then, you've got to go through all of those and sort them out to then pick the best photos for each person. So, mostly I've got more photos of people than I will share. and the ones I've shared are the best, or at least the equal best. Sometimes you're faced with the decision of going like, oh, they look good in this photo and that photo. Well, I just choose one and put that up. Yesterday's parkrun, we had one photo that a mother and child, and they actually did a fantastic jump. Like the youngster was like, who knows how many feet off the ground. They were unbelievable. But I managed to get mum jumping out of the frame. So she's, her hairdo is curtailed in that photo. But then I had another photo just a fraction of a second beforehand where, her hair is there, but her foot's on the ground, and that just didn't have the same feel. So I went with the one where I've chopped the haircut off. So
you can tell you put a lot into that. You're thinking about what photos to put forward. So thank you for being a photographer at Parkrun and helping people look their best.
And a story that I had with a work colleague who passed away, and at the funeral they had like 3 or 4 really bad photos of that individual. They don't know if they didn't have them, but they only showed 3 or 4 photos, and they were not very flattering photos, unfortunately. So I'm in a position where, as a parkrun photographer, I'm able to take photos of people out having fun and being active, and they're photos that people really appreciate. And I hope that people actually put those photos into their stash or their archive of photos, so that when people around them are looking for photos to remember that person, then they have a good selection to choose from. And they can remember lots and lots of good times. With parkrun, they happen to have been out there having fun and being active. So that's been a pretty big driver for me. One thing that I hope that people do is actually take those parkrun photos and save them. The photos are of you, but they're of most value to the people around you. And that's one of the key reasons why I do what I do.
After the break, let's have a look at the steps you took to become a photographer and be the best photographer that you can be. So, Paul, how did you become a photographer?
We always had a camera around it when we were young, but that was used occasionally, box brownie with film in it and all that sort of thing. And when I was working, I managed to obtain a camera through an incentive program, and that was a film camera, and I took that to Scotland, and that was interesting, getting some landscape shots with that, knowing pretty much nothing about photography. And then I put the camera down for a good number of years and took it up again when digital came along. So I got my first digital camera in 1998. That was a Kodak, or 1/3 of a megapixel camera. So it was interesting. Took that to India and got some interesting shots with that one. Used cameras a little bit and started to take photos of car rallies. And then Caroline started running, and we didn't really think about taking running photos at that point until we got to parkrun. I think photography has that combination of art and science that piques people's interest, and it certainly piqued my interest. You've got a mechanism that you can actually create the exposure that you want if you take control of the photo taking process. If you stick it on auto mode, it'll do it for you, but you don't tend to get the same enjoyment as you do when you get it. You think about it and work out what you want and actually achieve it. That makes a nicer process to me to do. But then there's also the artistic side of it. And the beauty of that is no two people look at something and go and take the same photo even. They just end up with different photos, which is very interesting. So, you never want to compare your photos to anybody else's. One of my guests on this podcast, Susie McMahon, relayed that comparison is the thief of joy. And that's very much a truism. So, if someone was to want to go and take photos at parkrun, you can start with a mobile phone camera. The primary thing that you want to do is fill the frame. And you can do that very practically. Just take your phone out and aim it at a person to take a photo and just check how much grass is down the bottom of the photo and how much sky is at the top and get those minimised. With a lot of phones, you have to get really close. Too close if that person is running, so you need to be aware of that. You've got to keep yourself safe. You don't want the runners or a group of runners running into you. They don't like it either. But one trick there is that if you naturally hold your phone in portrait mode, spin it 90 degrees so that it's in landscape mode. Then instead of having to fill like the full length of the phone, you only have to fill like what was the width of the phone. So now it's the height in landscape mode. And that allows you to get groups of people in and also allows you to get a little bit on the edge. But basically you're filling up the frame, but you're not standing quite as close because the individual doesn't have to be as big in the frame. And if you do have multiple lenses in your phone, give every lens a try and just see what the distances are like. But like I said, the main thing is fill the frame, get the person big in the frame so you can tell who it is. There might be some atmospheric type shots that you could get where the runners are small in the frame, where it's not necessarily about the individual runner at that point, it's about the beautiful scenery that we run through with park runs. And that's quite all right, but don't make all of your photos like that. You want to get the runners up close as well. Definitely a mix and match type scenario. As you progress along, if you don't have a camera and you get enthused and you want to have a go and get more into it, it really is a great thing to be doing. So the things to think about there are the speed at which your camera focuses and can take photos. You want the fastest focusing that you can afford, and you want to ensure that the photo can take at least 8 frames per second and more. You can get up to 12 or 15, even better. That's not essential. 8 or more will tend to give you a good choice of photos, those up and down running shots. The more you get, the more likely you are to get people with their feet off the ground, which is a hover shot, and that's, for some people that's the holy grail. They do get up in the air, but you'll see the fast runners get a long way up in the air, and those who are just getting up off the ground, they're the ones who are most enthralled by having those hover shots. And the faster frame rates help with getting that. And if you do end up getting a camera, you want to start working on your culling abilities. That's the ability to select the photos where the individuals look the best. You want to focus on that and only put up the photos where the people look good. If you do that, just make people look their best, then everyone in parkrun will love your photos. It's quite amazing because you're making them look good. They love it. It's really good, and you'll get feedback to say that you're doing when you make people look good, they'll like the photos much more and be much more appreciative of your photos.
Thank you for sharing your experience about being a photographer at Parkrun, Paul. And from all of us here at Forest.chat and all the listeners, we wish you all the best in your future endeavours and look forward to seeing you at a parkrun very soon. So,
thank you, Caroline. It's very interesting to talk about what I do with taking photos at parkrun. I've got one particular way, and I know that other people have other ways of doing it. I know there's a photographer at Albany, for example, that walks the course with his phone. It's an out and back course. So on the way out, he's taking photos. On the way back, he passes the tail walker. Once he passes the tail walker, he's on his phone, choosing the photos, deleting the ones he doesn't like, and he uploads them when he gets to the finish.
Wow, that's a very quick process there. So, yes.
So my way is not the only way.
And yes, different people find different ways of doing things, and that's great, isn't it? So you've been listening to Forest.chat, where we talk about individual endeavour in West Australia, what it takes, what it means, and how you do it. I'm your host, Caroline Vandermeer, and in today's episode, we were talking to Paul Vandermeer about being a photographer at parkrun. Remember, there are 4 ways you can get involved with Forest.chat. Share the domain forest.chat with your friends and family and people you meet. Listen to the published episodes at forest.chat/episodes. Book an interview. Have you got a story to tell or something you would like to share with others? So you can book an interview at forest.chat/interview. Or book an advert at forest.chat/advert. I'm looking forward to joining you with our next interview. Until next time, enjoy making it happen.